The Octatrack CUE is an internal stereo bus that feeds the CUE outputs separately from the main bus that feeds the main outputs. By default, all tracks are routed to the main outputs, and if you'd like to send tracks to the CUE, simply hold the CUE button while hitting track buttons. The cued track buttons will begin flashing, indicating that they are being sent to the CUE bus. Notice that while you are holding down the CUE button, the active track level switches to displaying the CUE level for that track, instead of its main output level. Every track has an independent CUE level and main level. It's called the CUE bus as the primary intended use is for auditioning or cueing an audio source during live performance that you aren't ready for the audience to hear yet. You can even cue the external inputs, which is perfect for using the Octatrack as a DJ mixer for a pair of turntables. Just like the main outputs, the CUE bus can be used as a Source 3 internal resampling source, but unlike the main bus, it will not be processed by master track effects. The headphone output of the Octatrack can crossfade between auditioning the CUE bus and the main outs. By default, both the CUE and main are sent out of the headphone outputs with equal gain, and this mix can be adjusted on the mixer page. While in the mixer page, the CUE button also allows for soloing tracks. Hold the CUE button and hit the trig keys of the tracks you'd like to solo. This somewhat obscure solo functionality can easily lead to confusion if you're not aware of it and activate it by accident. The CUE button is also useful for activating and deactivating the metronome, as well as for previewing samples by sending them out of the CUE outputs instead of the main outputs. In a nutshell, that's the Octatrack CUE bus, an assignable internal stereo mix bus that has a matching pair of physical outputs. So what about studio mode? I'm not a fan of using it, as studio mode somewhat reduces functionality. Let's switch it on and see what happens. The flashing LEDs indicating tracks that were being sent to the CUE have all disappeared, because with studio mode, every track is automatically routed to both the main and the CUE. However, now we can't independently mute a track sent to the CUE, as that functionality has been disabled. Muting a track in studio mode simultaneously mutes the send to both the CUE and main output bus, and holding CUE while pressing track buttons has no effect in studio mode. So studio mode gains us a small improvement for certain use cases, as regular muting now simultaneously controls the main and CUE send, and we can now see both the main level and CUE level of each track at the same time. However, for myself, the loss of the ability to quickly assign or remove tracks from the CUE bus is usually not worth being able to see the CUE level and main level of the active track at the same time. And if I want to mute a track's output to the CUE and main simultaneously, there are other options available. For the way I use the Octatrack, a better implementation would be to offer CUE and main level viewing as a display option, and have a completely independent setting for whether standard track muting also cuts the send to the CUE.